Welcome to another episode of Off the Plugin Chain. I'm your host, Dr. Tom. Today's video is going to be a breakdown of an action cue. So there's this developer, Bunker 8 Digital Labs, and they make a lot of wave files and loops and MIDI file construction kits, all sorts of things. They've got this series called Symphonic Intents, and so I've got a cue from Symphonic Intents Volume 3, and briefly taking a look at their website here. They've got some more information about it, talking about how it's part of a series that they have. They're exciting action cues. They've got wave files, MIDI files, and then construction kits. This particular volume comes with 2.8 gigabytes of content. There are altogether 10 construction kits, and each of those either has, well, they've all got MIDI files and wave files. So you can put the construction kit together based on how you want to work. If you want to just put together wave files, or if you want to use the MIDI files, you can do that. And so what we're going to look at today is going to be a cue called Temple of Euronymous. And here we are in Studio One. This is a cue that's 140 beats per minute. So I got that set. Quite often your DAW will default to 120 beats per minute. And so when I dropped these in here initially to set them up, they were playing back at 120, and boy, did it drag. We've got the tempo all squared away. We're going to listen to the complete version first. We've got 14 tracks set up. This first one at the top is the complete mix, and then there's complete melodics, complete drums, complete bass, and then there's crashes, hits, and timpani, and then you've got 3 tracks of violins, 2 tracks of cello, and then double bass, and then another track that has low bass altogether. So let's take a look and listen to the complete mix a little bit. So there's the complete mix, and now if we mute that one and then we listen to the complete melodics, drums, bass, and then the crashes. There was actually another stem called complete percussion, but they were identical, so I just put the crashes in because I also wanted to be able to take a look at the percussion by itself. But anyway, so let's play this one back, and this should sound very similar to what we just heard. Okay, so that's essentially the same as the complete mix, and it should be because those are all the complete instrument groups as stems by themselves. What you can do is you can mute different ones and you can see how they sound by themselves. So if we just play back the complete melodic stem, see how that sounds. Alright, and so you can hear how there's a lot of rhythmic vigor, and the different rhythmic figures that the strings are playing are moving the music forward along with the, well, this one is just the melodic, but when you start bringing in the percussion, then obviously with all that rhythmic intensity, it drives the music forward. So let's mute that, and now we'll unmute crashes, the hits, the timpani, and then we'll listen to the, actually let's listen to the long sustained strings. And so what you notice here is that the strings are providing some harmonic changes, and so that enables the music to move forward too, because you don't have static harmony. And so you have to be mindful that not just playing the same note all the time is really going to drive the music forward. There has to be some progression that's happening. The music has to be going somewhere, and so by having even just simple harmony like this, it moves the music forward. Go back to the beginning here, and then we'll add in the next line of violins, and this one is more detached, and that will also add to the rhythmic intensity. Okay, so there's a nice little detached figure there. If we bring in this last violin line, then that's really going to fill it out nicely. Okay, and what's really good about that is that that last violin line is in a higher octave, and so it fills it out more, because when I start bringing in the rest of these string lines, you'll start to notice that a lot of the music is in kind of this mid-ranges, and so it's getting kind of cluttered there. It's good to have some higher octave strings as well. We'll bring in the cello and see how that sounds. And so there you can tell just with the violins and the cello how that's starting to become a lot fuller, and the rhythmic intensity is really increasing just by adding those other instruments. If we mute these for a moment and just listen to the percussion, that can be informative. So let's try that. So what you get here is, you've got some crashes, some hits, and then timpani. What you want to make sure is that you don't overuse your percussion this way. Similar to how you would apply reverb a lot of times, just a little bit of percussion and effects can really go a long ways. You'll notice that the timpani are played at different intervals, and so that helps spread it out. And then another thing too is so much of this music is in 4-beat that sometimes when you bring in percussive effects to get a real dramatic effect with it, you'll bring it in on the last beat of the measure, so you bring it in on 4 and then you get the strong downbeat. This is a type of music you're not really looking to change time signatures or anything like that. It's driving forward, and with that you got to keep the pulse going, and part of that is emphasizing the downbeat as well as probably the third beat of the measure. But when you bring in these effects, for them to be effective, a lot of times you bring them in at the tail end of the measure right before the downbeat, and then you get a real dramatic effect. So let's play this back now with the percussion, the violins, and then the cello. Then after that we'll bring in the basses. So you can hear already how it's filling in really nicely. And now we'll bring in the double bass, and then there's another track here. It's called Low and Rich, but it's another bass line. So this should basically give you the same effect of the complete mix. That's pretty cool. What I like about this is that, we're able to listen to the violins by themselves. Let's listen to the cello by themselves. You can mute different instruments. You can see how the different instruments add to the overall texture of the cue, and you can get a sense of how it's all put together this way. You hear the cello, and then you hear the violins together like that, and it's a real nice effect. You can experiment with this. You can try muting certain tracks, play certain ones in isolation, solo them, and you can get a sense of how it's all put together. And one thing you'll notice with this track in particular is that there's no brass, there's no epic choir or anything. It's an action cue, but it's not really an epic cue, because you don't have those elements. You don't have the brass, you don't have all that bombastic percussion, taiko drums, and those sorts of things. You would have to be careful if you were going to play this for an extended amount of time, because you'd probably want some relief from just same sound of the string timbre. So what you probably want to do next is you'd probably want to bring in some brass, maybe some long brass notes, maybe some punctuated brass for a rhythmic effect, just as kind of a relief in a way, because the string's texture sounds really good, I'd say, but still you would want to change it up. You don't want to stay with just the same instrument timbre throughout. That way too, you could bring in the brass for special effect, something to kind of consider. But anyways, looking at these cues this way, very instructive. It helps you kind of get a sense of how they're put together. You can mute different cues, you can solo different cues, you can try different instrument groups, you can see how they're all built up. Just things that I think you should keep in mind is if you've got a regular pulse and then you got emphasis on the downbeat, and you're adding your effects on probably measure 4 going into the downbeat that gives a nice effect. Don't overuse your percussive effects. Just keep thinking about how are you going to move that music forward, and then like I'd said, you'd probably want to give some relief. It's so string heavy that you'd probably want to bring in brass next, or you'd want to do something different. Alright, well anyways, that's all I wanted to go over today, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, be well, stay safe, and keep being creative.